Hello, and welcome to another short box from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I am Zeckthar, and this week we'll be talking about the Black Crusades, or as the Traitor Legions call them, the Long War.
So if you listen to last week, we jumped ahead a bit to when Abbadon entered real space and started terrorizing everybody. But I must apologize. I got a little ahead of myself. The first Black Crusade does not actually start with Abbadon. Well, not in whole at least. Let me explain. To be frank, this all started way back at the Siege of Terra. To make a long story short, during the bloody struggles, Abbadon gained an enemy. Now mind you, I don't think the son of Horus and the future Warmaster would really care, nor did he realize he had made such an enemy. The name of this enemy was Sigismund, an Imperial fist at the time and the first Emperor's champion. Sigismund was tasked with killing Abbadon on Terra, and not completing his task was why he was one of the forerunners during the Great Scouring, hunting for Sons of Horus's heads. The Loyalists finally pushed back the traitors into the Eye of Terror. Sigismund did not believe that was all she wrote for the traitors, and had a sneaky suspicion that they would return. Yet he would have to wait, because Rabute Guilliman had just revealed the Codex Astartes, and the Second Founding was taking place. Sigismund became the very first High Marshal of the Black Templars. The chapter took upon themselves the black and white color scheme of Sigismund's personal heraldry at the Siege of Terra. Chosen as the Emperor's champion for his fervent faith in the Emperor and his undying devotion to mankind, those zealous warriors who became Black Templars sought to emulate their former first captain's heroic example. Seeing the strife that beset the Legiones Astartes during the days of the Second Founding, Sigismund determined that a gesture of supreme faith was needed. As High Marshal of the Black Templars, Sigismund swore a mighty oath that upon leaving Terra he would prove his loyalty, never resting in the prosecution of his duties against the enemies of the Emperor. It is an oath that every subsequent High Marshal has renewed, and so the greatest and longest Imperial Crusade in the Imperial history was begun. A crusade, ironically, that has continued unbroken for 10,000 Terran years. Now, to start this crusade, he made for the Cadian space post-haste, eager to get after the traitors. Even he had to chase them into the warp himself. To say the man was driven would be kind of an understatement. Yet not content to merely wait for the traitors to emerge from hiding, however, the High Marshal sent ships into the Eye to find them. One such ship was a strike cruiser commanded by Marshal Avathus that was boarded by demons after entering the Eye and then crashed into the Black Legion's held world, Amalium. When the Black Legion entered the strike cruiser, they found its crew was dead. But the ship still held a wealth of information, and the warband learned many centuries had passed for those outside of the Eye. More importantly, though, they learned that Sigismund had a large fleet guarding over the Eye. As the Black Legion continued to search through the crashed cruiser, the sorcerer Iskander Kaon heard a voice calling him, and this led him underground to Horus's former resting place, where he discovered the exiled Inquisitor Moriana. Though she was surrounded by the Black Legion, Moriana showed no fear and demanded to meet with Abbadon, as she had much to tell him about the Imperium and his own destiny. Kaon reluctantly complied, and she soon stood before the Lord of the Black Legion, and told him what became of the Imperium since he had entered the Eye of Terror. She also warned that Abbadon's quest to become the new Warmaster of Chaos was at risk of failing, as the Sorcerer Lord Thagus Derevek, Abbadon's main rival during the ongoing Legion Wars, also sought to become Warmaster. If he was not dealt with, Moriana was certain Derevak would gain the Chaos God's favor, and then kill Abbadon before destroying the Imperium himself. Abbadon then asked how Derevek would gain the title of Warmaster, and Moriana replied that both Derevek and Abbadon were both haunted by the same vision of the demon sword Drachnien. She claimed it lay outside the Eye of Terror, and whoever wielded the sword first would secure their position as the new Warmaster of Chaos, and bring the Imperium to its knees. This revelation gained Abbadon's interest, as he had told no one of his visions, and he now finally had a name for the sword that had haunted his dreams for some time. Afterwards, Abbadon focused his full attention on gaining possession of the Drachnien, and though Derevek still lived, he could not risk his rival claiming it first, and Abbadon ordered the majority of the Black Legion's fleet to prepare to exit the Eye of Terror. Though he knew the Black Templar fleet waited for his warband outside the Eye, Abbadon vowed to destroy them and anyone else that stood in the way of his destiny. The Black Legion mustered and soon escaped the Eye and soon confronted Sigismund and his Black Templars fleet in the year of 781.M31. As the two fleets clashed within the Cadian Gate, Abbadon left command of the Vengeful Spirit to the sorcerer Kaon, and personally led a boarding attack upon Sigismund's flagship,
the Eternal Crusader.
At this time, Sigismund was 1,000 years old, but despite his advanced age, his hatred of Abbadon and the traitors kept him alive, as he was too stubborn to die without ending their lives first. He proved this when Abbadon and his warband boarded Sigismund's flagship,
the Eternal Crusader.
During the battle, and scores of the Black Legion were killed in the attempt to claim the High Marshal's head. Finally, though, Abbadon found Sigismund and his sword brethren fighting within a large chamber, and their warriors stopped and gathered by their leaders' sides as the Lord of the Black Legion approached the Black Templar's High Marshal. Instead of drawing his weapons, however, Abbadon instead spoke with kindness to a foe that he had long respected, and gave an impassioned plea for Sigismund to open his eyes to the traitor's cause. He insisted that the Imperium rightfully belonged to the Space Marine legions that had bled and died to build it during the Great Crusade, and Sigismund should join them in reclaiming it from the Emperor's corpse. Sigismund pushed back against this, though, stating that by beginning the Horus Heresy and nearly destroying the Imperium, Abbadon and his fellow traitors were oath-breakers, who proved that they did not care for the empire that they had built. Though Abbadon continued to state the traitor's cause, as the Black Legion Lord had hoped to spare Sigismund's life, the High Marshal finally stopped him from any further attempts by stating flatly, "You keep speaking, Ezekiel. Do I look like I'm listening?" With that, they both drew their weapons, but Sigismund did not wield the sword of the High Marshals, and instead unsheathed his own black sword. The sword of the High Marshals was then given to one of Sigismund's sword brethren, who quickly left the chamber as Sigismund and Abbadon began their duel. What followed was a fierce battle between two heavily experienced opponents, in which neither was able to gain an advantage over the other. As though Abbadon was still in his prime, due to how little time had passed within the eye, Sigismund's sword skills were as sharp as ever. Eventually, however, Sigismund's age began to work against him, and he began to tire under Abbadon's unrelenting assault. Now I gotta stop here for half a second, because I keep mentioning Sigismund's age, because in the records this is continually brought up so people can understand what happens next. Yet, I think this is simple propaganda, because everyone loves a martyr, and frankly nobody in the Imperium wants to admit the simple fact. Abbadon on that day was simply better. Yes, we know the man was 1,000 years old, but both Dante and Logan Grimnar are around 1,000 years themselves, and in fact Dante is at least 1,500 years old, and neither of them are slowing down. In fact, a loyalist Iron Warrior named Barabbas d'Antioch was prematurely aged by the strange alien race known as the Harud, some 3,000 years. Yet after this, he continued to serve the Emperor and fought in the Horus Heresy until he was killed at the Battle of Sotha. My point is, this should be a moot point, other than to ease the conscience of the Imperium, having lost the hero of the Empire because nobody believed him when he said the traitors would be back. But, okay, regardless, knowing that his life was about to end, Sigismund laid a trap for Abbadon by stepping away from the Lord of the Black Legion. Abbadon thought this was his opportunity to end their duel and arrogantly rushed forward to kill the High Marshal. But this allowed Sigismund to strike a blow that left the black sword buried within Abbadon's chest. Doing so, however, left Sigismund defenseless, and Abbadon retaliated with a swing from the talon of Horus that severed the High Marshal into two pieces. Despite this horrific wound, though, Sigismund still clung to life, as Abbadon knelt down beside the High Marshal, while clenching his torn-apart chest. Abbadon kindly told his old foe that he regretted having to kill the High Marshal, but at least now Sigismund could finally rest. Sigismund replied not with an oath to the Emperor or his chapter's creed, but instead he used the last of his life to rebuke the Lord of the Black Legion. "You will die as your weakling father died, soulless, honorless, weeping, ashamed." And with that, Sigismund, first captain of the Imperial Fist, and then High Marshal of the Black Templars, died. Afterwards, Abbadon's warband gathered their wounded leader and the slain High Marshal before quickly evacuating
the Eternal Crusader,
as another of the Legion's foes had entered the battle during their boarding attack. The sorcerer Lord Thagus Derivak, commander of the Legion host and main rival for Abbadon's claim as the new Warmaster of Chaos, had pursued the Black Legion out of the Eye of Terror, and his warband had begun attacking their fleet. However, as the battle raged on, the tide turned in the Black Legion's favor, as the Legion host forced the Black Templars' fleet to escape into the warp, and Derevik was killed while boarding the Vengeful Spirit, which caused his warband to stop attacking the Black Legion. As for Abbadon himself, though he was provided with the best care the Black Legion possessed, he barely survived the wound dealt to him by Sigismund, and would forever keep the scar it left, as a sign of respect for the High Marshal. Before the Black Legion then left the Cadian Gate to begin their Black Crusade, they prepared to send a declaration of war to the Imperium's High Lords. Sigismund would bear this message, and his corpse and the Black Sword were respectfully placed in the captured Black Templar ship, Valorous Vow, whose databanks were filled with the information feeds and recording pics of the First Battle of Cadia. As the slave-crewed Valorous Vow was prepared to be sent on its long journey to Terra, Abbadon had sorcerer Iskander Kaon carve 3 simple words into Sigismund's black sword: "We are returned." Now, while Abbadon had claimed a great victory against the Imperium, that was simply a bonus for the leader of the Black Legion. He was in reality looking for his sword, and made straight away to the dark planet it resided on, Erlon. Not to look a gift horse in the mouth, though, Abbadon sent his generals on a killing spree. You see, the Imperium at this time had yet to build their vast defenses on Cadia and the naval port of Bellis Corona, and Abbadon's invasion stormed across thousands of worlds in a mighty push to force the Emperor to bow before the forces of chaos. The worlds close to the Eye of Terror fell into mayhem and chaos as legions descended from the sky and demons tore their way into reality. On the aggro world of Valencia, Zeckthar, the Broken, led his warband in an orgy of violence and destruction. For his own dark pleasure, the warlord constructed a vast maze of thorns from the world's blood-rose orchids, blinding his prisoners and loosing them within its twisted tunnels before hunting them down at his leisure. Not to be undone, Erlak and his company of raptors unleashed atrocities on the hive cities of Melfia, which included hanging millions of citizens from gigantic gallows. The invasion itself was more of a blunt sword action than a wicked sharp blade, which most of the other Black Crusades would be. It seemed that little could stop the oncoming chaos as world after world was burnt. The only bastion that stood firm was the world of Cadia. On the world of Earthwart, Cadian forces, aided by the Imperial's Fist's 4th and 5th Companies, defended against the Chaos onslaught led by the First Defilers. After 4 days of vicious combat, the Chaos forces were forced to retreat, while the Imperial forces eventually managed to reclaim lost territory. Scores of their worlds were shattered, and the Black Legion had done much to wash away the shame of their defeat in the heresy and restore their failing morale. Now, while all this was going on, Abbadon was making his way to the Tower of Silence on Erlon, with a cadre of the Black Legion's elite warriors, each one brutal veterans of 1,000 battles. Abbadon set foot on Erlon and entered the Tower of Silence. Almost at once, the tower's guardians set upon them, ancient constructs of dark energy that shifted and flickered, their claws tearing at the ragged edges of his warriors' souls. After the bitter battle, Abbadon climbed down into the mirrored heart of Erlon. There, Abbadon wandered the massive haunted labyrinth for what seemed an age, fighting off the spirits of the dead that threatened to add him to their ranks. Eventually, Abbadon made his way towards the center of the labyrinth, where a shard of shifting darkness hung suspended in the air. Reaching out into the void, Abbadon felt the cold hilt of a blade meet his palm, and he pulled it into reality. The demon sword, Drachnien, took terrible shape before his eyes. After the recovery of the malefic sword, the new Warmaster of Chaos became nigh unstoppable. Whole cities were burned and sacrificed to the ever-hungry demons of chaos, and entire armies were torn apart by the gibbering warp entities. Abbadon's power swelled to inhuman proportions as the gods of chaos rewarded him lavishly, and he undertook acts of fiendish bravery which horrified those who stood against him. Accomplishing his quest, Abbadon retreated into the Eye, where he remained, building his forces until the next time he struck in the year of 597.M32. This would be known as the Second Black Crusade, and that is where we will pick up next week. I hope you enjoyed this Vox, and if you did, please like, comment, follow, and of course, subscribe.
And as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.